Welcome to another episode of the Show Up Dad podcast. I'm your host, David Mendonca, and today we're discussing the significance of fathers who are actively involved in their children's lives. Before we delve into our conversation, I want to express our gratitude to our sponsors for their support. This episode of the Show Up Dad is sponsored by Tallman Equipment, a trusted provider of high-quality tools and equipment for the powerline industry. Visit tallmanequipment.com to explore their wide range of products and how they can assist you. I also want to give a special shout out to the Show Up Dad Foundation, an organization dedicated to supporting fathers on their journey to become the best versions of themselves. Through workshops, resources, and supportive community, the Show Up Dad Foundation empowers dads to be present and make a positive impact on their children's lives. Learn more about their mission and how you can get involved at the showupdadfoundation.org. Today, guys, our special guest is none other than Jeff Forrester. Jeff, a resident of Orlando, Florida, has been happily married to his wife, Tammy, for over 18 years. They have two wonderful children, Deuce and Lori Lee. Jeff finds his greatest joy in witnessing others achieve more than they thought possible. In 2020, he released his debut book, Unleash Potential: Simple Steps to be the Best Version of Yourself, sharing stories and lessons from his own life. As a coach, Jeff brings his wealth of experience and an infectious energy to help others unlock their full potential. Welcome to our show. Jeff, I want to start off here to ask you about your wealth of knowledge and experience in your field. I'd learn more about your journey and the insights you've gained along the way, brother. Can you just tell us a little bit about how you got started and what motivates you to work?
Oh, for sure. Well, first, I really love the name of the Show Up Dad, because it's something that we have to do. And for me in my past, that it wasn't something that I always did, even though that I thought I was. And I was a 22-year veteran of the corporate world, chasing the titles on the business cards and just trying to do everything I can and putting my family and God last. I'm not even sure I would say second. And so through some changes in my career, and then finally being laid off in 2021, I was in the healthcare pharmaceutical industry, and that industry always had ebbs and flows, ups and downs. And so we found ourselves always in an expanding and contracting world. And so finally it contracted enough to where I was done. But through my corporate career, I do feel, actually, I know that God equipped me during those 22 years to get to where I am today. And I had multiple different roles as a salesman, as a trainer, as a marketer, as a first line manager, second line manager. And then through all that, I just found I received so much more when I saw people walk across the stage than when I won anything. So I started to connect the dots that it was something that it was my gift that I like to pour into people. And when I do my personality profile, I'm considered a peacemaker. So I like to see other people succeed. I like to be involved in the team and not necessarily grabbing the spotlight. So through all that, just like I said, I was laid off and I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know, I wrote this book. I have a passion for helping people. I want to see people to do well, but I'm the sole provider for my family. So what am I going to do now? Do I try to go get a W-2 job, or do I try to do what people have encouraged me to do? And that was to become a coach and a consultant. And so prayed a lot about it. I was laying on the couch and prayed. And I've never heard the audible voice of God. And I still don't think that I have, but I just had this overwhelming feeling of which decision. So do I go to the coaching route, or do I go to the W-2 route again? Which route would require me to have more faith in God to provide? Well, it was clearly the coaching route, because I felt like if I was going to go the W-2 route, then I'm depending on the company that I'm working for to pay my bills, to support my family, and to do those type things, where this was a challenge. Because I heard that, then the next thing, Dave, is I felt this overwhelming feeling of the story of the good master. The rich man comes to Jesus and it's like, okay, I've done all these things. I've checked all these boxes. Now what do you want me to do? It's like, sell everything you have and follow me. So a long, deep swallow. I was trying to decide. It's like, okay, I'm not sure if I'm ready for that. particular statement, but I got the gist of, are you really going to go all in with me as your guide? And I went on a run, heard a podcast, heard a lot of the same things. So I came back home and I told my wife what I heard. And even
Mhm.
before I told her, I had this battle in my head because I was like, okay, I heard this and I felt this. She's going to think I'm crazy.
Mhm.
Because here we are, 2 kids. She doesn't work, to earn a paycheck. She definitely works. But what are we going to do? And so I finally, after wrestling within my own mind for about 5 minutes, I came out and I said, okay, here's what I heard and here's what I thought. I don't want an answer now because I'm not sure if I'm ready for an answer. And I said, we just need to pray about it because this is real. If we do this, we
Mhm.
need to go in for at least a year to try to make this thing work. And so, and I'm giving you this background because it does mean something to the overall story.
Yeah.
And through that, we decided I prayed all day. I'm pretty sure she did as well. And then that night we just made the decision of this is the way we're going to go.
Mhm.
And we said, okay, as a family, I'm going to pursue becoming this coach and try to start a coaching business. Well, David, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's really hard to start at completely ground. I mean, at the bottom floor. Like I had no clients, I had nothing. It was just
Mhm.
okay. All of a sudden, let's get started. And it was a challenge because I had a vision of helping men, so kind of similar to what you're doing, helping dads, and then even tapping into my corporate experience and helping leaders and managers.
Mhm.
And I just had a hard time trying to sell my worth and sell me and tell people why I was good enough and why I was worth it. That was an
Mhm.
internal struggle for sure. It was, um, but I see now that that wasn't the path that I was supposed to go on. So in the meantime, I had picked up and tried to get I got my real estate license, trying to feed things and do things. Well, none of it was working. So I'm 8 months into this thing and we're running out of money from the savings account. And I just told my wife, I was like, I don't know. I think I'm done. I think I'm ready to
Mhm.
go back and just get a job. And she looked at me and she was like, dude, you said a year. So has not been a year yet.
Mhm.
And it was a very monumental moment for me because I saw that she had faith and I did not. I was
Mhm.
weak, and it was that moment that I needed her to push me. And then I went into this. I wanted God to provide, because here we are. We're running through money. We were never, and we still aren't in danger of losing our house or going hungry or running up credit cards. And I share all that because I wanted God to provide, but I was thinking about him providing in front of me. Like, I need
Mhm.
clients, I want this, I want that. And I was walking the dog, had this other overwhelming feeling of, well, Jeff, I've been providing you for the past 22 years. I've
Wow.
provided a 401k, I've provided a savings account, I've provided you training, I've provided you everything. And it was almost, I had this guilty feeling of, I can't believe that I was so focused on looking forward. I wasn't appreciative of all the things that he had done for me.
Yeah.
So then that really helped give me some oomph. It doesn't mean that I'm not oblivious, but just that I don't have bad days, because I still have bad
Yeah.
days. So all
Oh, yeah.
that, then oh, go ahead.
No, no, no. I just
Oh,
agreeing
okay.
with you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no. And there is a point to all this. And so through all that, it was just that battle. And then I happened to run in just looking on Facebook, and I hate Facebook, but
Mhm.
everybody said as a coach, you need to be on there, you need to be looking. Well, I came across a lady named Jessica Villegas, who had started Highlight Coaching and Consulting, and which identifies just with teens and young adults. That's the sole focus of coaching teens and young adults. I was like, well, that's
Mhm.
unique. I never thought about that niche. And introduced myself to her thinking, well, maybe she might have a couple of clients, or the parents, or, I could sell a couple of books. I would just something. I just found it interesting to want to learn more about why she did what she, started, and, how things are going and what did she do, and see if there was somebody that I could learn from.
Yeah.
And so then she's like, well, hey, I may have a couple of clients that I just can't take right now. Would you be interested? And I said, sure. Well, David, as soon as I worked with the first young person, I was hooked, just
Mm.
absolutely hooked because, one of the questions that you had shared was, why do I do what I do? So I give you all that background to say that I didn't know why I was going to do what I'm doing now. And
Mhm.
that was just a year and a half ago when I finally kind of moved into the youth coaching. It was, I needed me when I was 15 or 16. I had really low self-esteem. I'm a big guy and I played sports, but I was fat. I was fat. I was very self-conscious of it, and just I lived in my head too much. I was afraid. I I was really good at quitting everything because, and it wasn't, I have wonderful parents. My dad passed away in 1991 from lung cancer. I just graduated high school, and then it was my mom, and she's wonderful. So by no means am I casting anything on them. It was just, I needed somebody other than them that I could
Yeah.
lean on and that I could talk to, that could guide me, a mentor, so to speak, but where I do more coaching than mentoring because I want to challenge and teach young people how to think and how to
Mhm.
equip themselves of how to move forward. And it's been absolutely wonderful. And so when you see the light bulbs go off and you see them paint the picture of their future self, that's why I do what I do, because I want to be someone who could help the Jeff that just needed just a little bit of encouragement, a little bit of a challenge, and not be a coach or a family member that you have to deal with all the time.
Yeah.
Because when you don't have that third party resource, you don't feel safe. As much as you love your coach and your parents, always, at least me, I've always had that little bit of, if I tell them something, they're going to judge me. And if it's my coach, he may, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't play Jeff because he's a little unsure of himself here. Just like in the corporate world, you don't tell your boss you don't know how to do something. I mean, that's the last, and you don't tell coworkers because you know that they're probably going to use that at some point. And I know that's a paranoid perspective, but I've seen
Mhm.
it so much that
Mhm.
having a dotted line into your life of somebody who is there just to listen, and then also to challenge you of how to move forward and how to create systems and learn tactics and skills is something that I needed and that I
Mhm.
need now. So I have a coach that I've worked with that's great. It's wonderful. And so that was a really long introduction to why I do what I do and who am I.
No, well, thank you for sharing that for sure. Jeff, why do you feel like even for like men, right? That we feel that we cannot go to our bosses or our coach or even our parents. Why do you think young people feel that way? Is it our culture that we just can't share because we're afraid of being vulnerable to that person? Like what
Yeah,
drives
and
that?
it's a great question. And I wish I had the exact answer. And I'll
Hmm.
share what my one of the things that my coach had, we're working on, like my offer and what to do and how to position that. And so a lot of it was around the difference between humility and being prideful. I think a
Yeah.
lot of times we feel like we don't want to share something out of ego because of what someone else will think about us.
Hmm.
And that's where it's so important as dads is to be vulnerable and authentic to our kids. Again, age appropriate level of authenticity and vulnerability, but to paint that picture that it's okay to share. And we're seeing that in our age group. We're seeing more men be open to be, you know what, I can still be a man. I can be masculine and be able to share what I really have going on inside without somebody looking at me and having that John Wayne mentality. And I think Hollywood did a really good job of creating that persona of the lone cowboy riding off into the sunset by himself who doesn't need anybody else. And that
Mm-hmm.
is just the complete worst thing that you can do. And then you also don't want to swing so far to the other side where all you do is you sit around and mope and whine and have a fixed mindset of everybody's against me. This is why I can't do anything. It's a very, it's not a balancing act because I don't think you could balance it, but it there is a plus and minus to both. It's like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to be vulnerable, but I'm also going to own it and then
Mm-hmm.
grab it and move forward, because sitting in it for too long is actually unhealthy.
Yeah, definitely. You definitely got to have wisdom because you don't want to be open and just share out or be a bleeding heart, right, to everybody because you don't know what man's intentions are. I know the human race has capabilities to do extremely good and extremely bad. I mean, we see it on the news and everything like that. So you definitely need to have wisdom. You definitely got to be wise as serpents and gentle as doves when you
Yes.
deal with that.
I like that. I like that for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think it's just been one of those things that has been passed down. It's a
Uh-huh.
generational curse,
Hmm.
from our grandparents or our grandparents' grandparents, and then they keep moving all the way down to where we're at. Like my granddad, he was a depression baby, and he served in World War II and was actually one of the soldiers that liberated Dachau. And
Hmm.
so can only imagine what he saw and experienced as a young adult. Somebody
Hmm.
probably 20, maybe. I think he was like maybe 20. And so he comes back with all of these things in his head, but they didn't know the importance of, opening up and sharing those things back then. So he retreated inside and then took that out on his family by not wanting to share. Like he never wanted to tell the stories because it was just easier to just bury it, just
Yeah.
swallow it and be done and move on. Well, then what do you teach your children? Well, don't talk about it. Don't talk about bad things. And I'm from a Southern family, and
Hmm.
Southern families don't talk about anything. It's like, just if you don't talk about it, it doesn't exist. Well,
Hmm.
we all know that that's just going to fester, and it's going to be worse than if you just went ahead and talked about it, owned it, and then moved
Hmm.
on. Because one, that takes the power from that situation. Once you own it and nobody can hold that over your head, like, well, okay, yeah, I did that. I'm not
Hmm.
happy. I'm not proud, but I'm ready to move on. Why can't you move on?
Hmm.
And that's a position I feel that we have to teach our young people, of how to be strong and how to say, I made a mistake and I'm ready to move on.
Man, Jeff, I can't agree with you more. I think more than ever, I've seen so many young men and women both have a victim mentality and not take accountability for their own actions. It seems like it's so much easier just to point the finger and say, well, because of this, I acted like this. And what we're trying to get people to understand, and even our listeners, if you're listening right now, that when you don't take responsibility, you basically are giving yourself an excuse for why you act the way you do and not have to change,
Yep.
you know? And to me, that's childish. It really, really is. It's showing a level of immaturity. And unfortunately, that's our parents' job, is to raise our children up to maturity, to have self-control, discipline, have your values, your character, all these different things. That's what parents are supposed to do when we train them and disciple our children. And unfortunately, a lot of them are failing in that
Yeah.
aspect. You know,
Well, and it's unfortunate because they're not equipped. So
yeah.
it's like, it's tough because you just, use the example of a driver's license. You would never just take somebody and give them a driver's license, say, here's the keys, here's the car, go.
Hmm.
And we all know why. One, they're a danger to themselves. And two, they're a danger for me. They could
Hmm.
run me over. So you have a year that they have to practice, they have to have mentorship through the driving process. But a parent, we all know if you can just do one act and it takes, you're ready to go. And there's so many
Yeah.
people that just aren't ready for that. And being a dad, as much as help as I had with people around me, man, they don't tell you about the teenage years. They don't tell you about just the challenges that you're going to encounter. And so for me, for the dads that are out there, if you're not being an active participant in your own development as a father,
Mhm.
you're failing your family. And I know that may sound harsh, but it's true. It's
Mhm.
We can learn how to be a good dad. We can learn how to be a good husband. It doesn't just happen. Some people have better control over their emotions. They have better control over whatever else that they're dealing with. But
Mhm.
some of us need help. Some of us need a mentor that is going to guide us. We all need the Bible, which will explain to us exactly how we're to perform as a father and as a
Mhm.
husband. And it's tough when you have parents that want to do a good job, but they just don't know what to do. So they just default to what they grew up in and what they
Yes.
learned. And so we can break the generational curse if you decide that that's what you want to do.
Yes, definitely. We have a choice. I like that you pointed out, Jeff, about the Bible, because you're absolutely right. That's our blueprint. For a long time, I always said, what my parents showed me is what I know. They could only give me what they had and all this stuff. And then I started doing this great mentorship with Pastor Craig Castor with FDM Ministries. And he started discipling us on marriage and also in children discipleship. And I'm a pastor, by the way, myself. And once he started delving into that, because I had grown up, with the Word of God and knowing it and having this head knowledge of what the Bible actually says, but to actually follow through with it and be obedient and actually learn that a part of that process of change and where God does a miracle is when we decide to be obedient to what he's asking us and abiding in him. I cannot on my own do what the Bible is asking me to do because it's our sin nature, right? We have a very sinful nature. When a child is being very disrespectful to me, my sin nature wants to respond, well, you're going to do this and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden I'm misrepresenting God in those moments. So God is perfect in all his ways and he tells us the way he wants us to do it, but he also is faithful and just to give us the Holy Spirit and Jesus Christ when we're able to come to him and say and confess that, hey, God, I can't do this on my own. What you're asking me is virtually impossible, but I need your help. And it takes that level of humility to go to him and ask him. And that's, my friends, is where the miracle takes place.
Amen, for sure. And then and all that can happen through intentional work.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I do with young people, and I use it with young people, David, because it worked for me,
Mm-hmm.
is that it's called signs of success. So I
Mm-hmm.
love post-it notes. And I got the post-it note idea from David Goggins' book, um, Can't Hurt Me. And he
Mm-hmm.
uses the accountability mirror. And so I use it in a different way than he suggests, but I write down all the words of how I want to show up because you can program your brain to start changing the way it thinks naturally. Meaning that if you're a natural negative person and you ruminate over the negative things, which I do, and you think of just all the fixed mindsets, the victim mentality, you can change that. It's not going to change overnight, but you start by writing all the positive words down and you read them over and over and over, just like of why we're commanded to meditate in the scriptures.
Yeah.
The more you read it, the more you become. And it talks about, just think of these things, take every thought captive. So if it's a bad thought, replace it with good thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Get rid of it, lock it up, move it aside. But then you have to start looking and thinking about, what are you pouring into your brain? So young
Mm-hmm.
people, old people alike, is if you eat junk food, you feel bad and you get fat and you have medical problems. Same thing as if you're feeding your brain with junk food or aggressive, angry music and bad things that you look at on the computer. Next thing you know, you're just feeding that in there. And that's the
Mm-hmm.
devil's playground. And so by writing those things out and putting the signs of success around, you'll start to see change over time. Like I said, is that it changed me. And it didn't happen overnight, but it's the little changes that I reminded myself and giving myself phrases that I would need when I was in that loop of negativity, which happens with young people.
Mm-hmm.
It's because they don't have the frontal lobe development yet to see, okay, this is just right this minute. I can get past this. As adults, usually we do a pretty good job with that. Not
Yeah.
everybody, but young people, it's just physically they're not developed enough to think of consequences. Because how many times have we said to our kids, what in the world were you thinking?
Mm-hmm.
They weren't. And you sit there and you're like, what? How did you not know that you do this, that's going to happen? I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. I just didn't think. But that happens. And so that's why we have to be aware. We have to start pushing them in a positive way to start thinking of, if you do A, then B will happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then as you go through that, then you're starting to chip away that we can imprint this on 15 and 16-year-olds in a positive manner. Imagine how much further in life that they'll be as they continue to progress through, and they're getting the development and they're connecting with good, positive people. So it's a win-win for everybody, but it takes a lot of work. I mean, I have
Mm-hmm.
2 kids, and you would think that they would be like on it, but I'm dad. So they're not as, I think they're pretty good at hearing me, but
Mm-hmm.
they don't receive it as much as it probably would if they came from somebody else. But I have to practice what I preach, and it's not easy. We talked about before, if I lose it and I snap, then I have to say I'm sorry. I have to go
Yes.
back and be that authentic, vulnerable dad, because I want them to know that it's okay to say they're sorry, that it's okay to say, look, that's not how I'm supposed to act. You didn't deserve that. That was uncalled for. And not that it's ever been horrific, but when it's out of my character, then that's when that bothers me.
Mhm. Man, and that has a tremendous effect. Let me tell you, Jeff, when you're able to go to your children, ask for forgiveness, and let them know where you fell short, right? You should see the way they respond to that. It's like, wow, dad's saying for you know, dad's admitting something. It's like weird, you know what I mean? And
Mhm.
when you're able to do that to them, you're showing them to take accountability,
Mhm.
right? You're training them because, like you said, it's hard. It's hard being a father. It's hard being a parent, and we have these children, right, that we need to raise up to maturity, and it doesn't happen overnight. And one of the big things I like to tell fathers out there is that, man, when they do make a mistake and they mess up, I don't like to tell them, what are you thinking? I like to just stop and be self aware, right? And I like to tell myself, remember, foolishness is stored up in the heart of a child. So if the Bible tells us that, then guess what? They're going to do stupid stuff. So don't take offense to it. Just know that they need more training. And that's what I like to tell people, is it's measurable. When your child makes a mistake, then that's an area of life that they need more training on. That's it. It's not to take an offense and to throw your hands up in the air and give up. And tell God, why did you give me this child? Take him
Yeah.
back or anything like that.
It's a
You know
good
what I
thing he
mean?
doesn't say that about
Exactly, right?
us.
How would we like that if he told us that,
Oh
right?
my goodness. How many times would he roll his eyes if he
Oh
and
my
I'm just
God.
go ahead.
Well, the home is the ultimate training ground for
Hmm.
us as parents and for our children.
Yeah. Yeah. No doubt for that. And when you were talking about being frustrated and seeing certain things is again,
Hmm.
ownership is, did you explain it well enough and set the proper expectations up front? I would challenge most people that the vast majority of the time that you're as a parent, you've become frustrated with your child. It's because you haven't properly set the expectation up front. You assume that you were clear. Well, we just talked about they don't see it, they don't understand it. So do your best to not be frustrated and ask yourself, did I do enough to explain it? Not this, they're 13, they should know by now. Nope.
Hmm.
That's inexcusable. You cannot say that because they're learning everything from us. And so I use the example of cleaning the room is that when my son was much younger, I had a couple episodes where I'd say, clean your room. He'd go up there. I'd go up there and I'm like, this isn't clean. He's like, I thought it was clean. I was like, okay, well, clearly we're in this loop that's not working out for either one of us and causing us frustration. And so we went in there calmly together. I was like, okay, now let's clean the room together. So we cleaned the room together and then we stepped back. I was like, okay, what do you see? He's like, it's a clean room. I go, this is my definition of a clean room. So when I ask you if your room's clean, this is what I expect it to look like. Are you in agreement that you understand that this is the level of clean that's required? Yes. I was like, okay, if it's clean, then you can have Xbox time. And so I
Hmm.
would holler. He wanted to play Xbox. I'm like, is your room clean? Well, kinda. I was like, nope, nobody. It's a yes or no question. And he's like, no. It's like, okay, well, you go. And then he got it clean. So he may have been a little frustrated with me, but I was still calm and collected. I had my everything together. And as a coach, that's what we have to do. We have to make sure that we stay in tune and that we've explained ourselves of the expectations that are required. And so then it comes back. Now, is that a perfect equation every time? No. Um,
Hmm.
and but it sets you up better because I know in my corporate experience, anytime where I was challenged with a situation at work and having to reprimand someone or fire someone because of their actions or lack of action, not even their actions but lack of action, I had to ask myself, did I do enough to set the expectations up front? And usually if I had that nervous feeling in my stomach that I did not want to have this conversation, I wasn't going to enjoy it, it's
Hmm.
because I didn't set the expectation. If expectations are clear, then you go to someone and say, okay, we talked about this. You agreed to this level of performance and you didn't deliver and you knew this was going to be the outcome. What do you have to say? And there's really not. I mean, they can react and be the victim,
Hmm.
but in the long run, you did everything you needed to do. You laid it out, you set it out properly, and you didn't change the rules in the middle of the game either.
Hmm. I like that you said that. Don't change the rules in the middle of the game. Do you know how many parents do that? It is insane. And then what does that breed? It's hypocrisy, right? And then it breeds rebellion. And then when your kids turn into adolescent teenagers, what happens? You got this rebellious teenager that doesn't abide by anything you're saying, and you're wondering why. So you need a level of consistency for sure.
Definitely. And one of the things that helped me do that, so I'm a big believer in having a mission statement, having a
Yes.
personal mission statement. And so I don't memorize well, so I have it printed out and I've had it everywhere. So along with
Mhm.
the signs of success, having this personal mission statement, David, changed my life,
Mhm.
completely changed my life and how I show up every day. And if you don't mind, I'll read it just because I
Yeah,
think it's
please.
important. And my kids see it, so everybody knows that I have it. Like, I'm not afraid to have it. So I have it in front of my desk in 2 different places. I have it on my mirror. I've had it there for 6 years. So it says, I live a Christ-like centered life focused on loving others. I'm grateful for the abundance I have in every aspect of my life. I maintain a high level of integrity to live as a good example to others and keep promises I make to myself. I will be confident in who I am and what I stand for. Galatians 2:20.
I like that.
And when you read that every day, then you have these conversations in your head that we're having is, am I showing up with integrity? So am I changing the rules in the middle of the game? That's not showing integrity by any means. Am I, borrowing someone's login and password because I don't want to pay for an account? That's not integrity. So if you're going to live it, you have to live it. And so I want to be able to show the people that I work with, the people that I'm friends with, and my family, that integrity is really, really important to me. And I have to admit it, it hasn't always. I've said it was, but my actions did not measure up to what I determined as being, a person of integrity.
I think a lot of times, Jeff, for ourselves, right, we have to hold ourselves to these standards, right? And man, sometimes our biggest, I'll be honest, I'm my own biggest critic. You know what I mean? I don't like the way something comes out or whatever. And I'll just harp and harp and harp over it, and I'm guilty of it. You know what I mean? It's one of the things as fathers, we sometimes, carry on this tremendous amount of stress that we didn't need to carry, for our shortcomings or whatever, but it's all about being that intentional father and having that good character, right? Having that good character and doing what is right when nobody is watching.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like we have to think about, if we're going to teach and I'm going to coach and help young people, I better be buttoned up. So if you're a dad, I would imagine most of your listeners are dads, you have kids that are watching every single thing that you do, and they don't miss anything. You may think you're pulling the wool over their eyes. They see it all, and they can pick out when you're lying and not being truthful. And you have to show up. And so one of the exercises we do with the young people and athletes is they have to pick their values. And so I encourage everybody to select and think of 5 words that you align to your values, and then define them, and then tell everybody about them. And the key thing is if you're not showing up as your values yet, and you think people roll their eyes if they hear it, start living differently. Make every decision based on those values, and then have values for your family. Mine happen to be the same for both. And, when I have my values, it's integrity, it's health, discipline, family, and Christ-like. Because for me, if I just, Christ-like could be my only one, and then everything rolls up underneath that.
Yeah.
But it's like, that's how I want us to show up all the time. I want us to show up healthy. I want us to have integrity and be that family that everybody can depend on, and know that our word is our word, and that we're not, somebody that's going to be gossiping behind their back, or, doing the things that we shouldn't be doing. And then having the discipline to, like you said earlier, be authentic, own our mistakes, really work of, okay, what do we need to do? And again, we are far from perfect of this.
Yeah.
And I liked what you were saying earlier about our sinful nature. I mean, Paul, he's the best example of what discipline's really about. And then what was it, Romans 7? I do what I don't want to do. It's the do verses. And I think it's just it's a beautiful representation of, we're not going to be perfect, but just try hard every single day to show up, and then encourage your kids. And like with me, with student athletes, I just encourage them to show up every day if they want the goal and they want the things that they see for themselves. It's not going to happen by chance.
Hmm. No, I like that. One of the things, Jeff, that we're dealing with now is my daughter is she's graduating, right? Or she already graduated, but she started college. Today was her first day of college.
Oh man,
Okay.
I'm not looking forward to that.
Bro, let me tell you, it's something different. It's a new season in our lives, right? I raised my child up, all the way up to this point. And I think a lot of times it's like, okay, if you can just get him here, we're done. And I'm here to tell you it's never ends, because now we are at a different season. I'm having to move into a role where I'm having to be more encouraging with her because she cried in the car today. She was scared. And I'm like, what is there really to be afraid of? Because the campus is huge, right? And she's like, I don't know. And I was like, look, man, you came from a whole different state during the middle of a COVID year to a school that was 5 times bigger than your hometown school. People you never knew. You walked on to the cheerleading team. You made it. And then you never ran track and you made varsity track and you lettered. I was like, oh, so that takes a lot of courage. I was like, it's the same amount of courage you're going to need now going into this new school. I was like, the same grit, same determination, the same young lady I see right now is capable of doing that. And, that's part of our role, like you're saying, a coach, that we put on different hats for as a father, right? We got to switch from nurturer to coaching to encourager to provider. All these different hats that we have to wear,
Mm-hmm.
The goal is to be able to recognize when what hat is needed. Right. At that moment, she didn't need a dad who was going to lecture her. She needed a dad to empathize with her and to encourage her.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the goal. That's what we got to learn as fathers.
Oh yeah, and it's hard, and there's so many of us that just can't make that shift and it's not because they can't, it's because they don't want to, because they're scared of letting go. They're scared of their kids growing up and moving on, which all they're doing is they're just driving a wedge in the relationship, because it's okay, she's an adult. She can do whatever she wants to now. And she could before, and we trick ourselves thinking that, well, they're under our roof. We remember what we did, and it's that moment of be real, be understanding that as you equip them, that you understand that if you've done everything that you can, you're not perfect. My mom was not perfect, but she was amazing. She gave me so much good stuff that and she says, she's like, I'm 51 and I'm the baby. And so she's like, there's so many things I wish I would have done different. I'm like, Mom, you did an unbelievable job. My brother and I are good humans. We're, both, we love her, we love each other, we take care of one another. And I was like, there's nothing else you could have done. I'm like, you did what you could. She had a rough childhood. And so you have all these things that people bring with them. And it's just that moment of, I learned from her is she was constantly into self-help and listening to positive things. And David, she's probably the most positive person on the planet. And I'm glad that I had a mom like that, because I know, one, she nurtured me to quit because she just loved me so much that she just, as soon as her baby said, no, I don't want to do it, she was like, okay. Which was her downfall. And that's what she talked about, is that she wished she would have pushed me a little further. But knowing what she came from, I totally understand it. I was like, Mom, I get it. I understand why. And so as we're looking at developing really a coaching plan for our family, is start to think of the questions that you can ask, versus like what you said is, instead of instructing all the time, what can you ask? What can you talk about? One of the big things with student athletes is when they get in the car after a game. And I've asked my son this question. I've asked other athletes this question, and I've heard a lot of conversation about it, is what do you do when they get in the game? Well, as a dad, I have my opinions. I know all the things that you did wrong, that you did right, the coaches didn't do. And it's like the kid knows. Be the parent, don't be the coach. And one of the best things that I learned was just say, I love you and I'm proud of you. And that's it. Let them process, let them decompress, because they're thinking of all the things that they didn't do correctly. They're thinking of the things that they did do correctly, but allow them time to process. You need process time. Everybody does. And then share, because it's probably burning inside of you because you want to tell them what they should do and what the coach should have done. Say, hey, look, it was fun to watch that game and watch you be out there competing. If or when you're ready, and if you're interested, I have some thoughts about the game I'd love to share with you. And then that's it. Leave it at that. And now what you're starting to do is hopefully building trust. Have they taken me up on it? Not normally. Over time, they probably will, because they'll mature in them understanding. But I have to make sure that I keep the environment safe in not telling them everything, because you'll hear these athletes later. They're like, the one example was the son asked the mom, can I ride with you home today? Because I don't want to ride home with dad after a bad game. Like, that's terrible. I never want my kids to say that.
Yeah.
And we have to think about that. And when you were talking about your situation, I started thinking about all the things that we have to do to shift. And, we want to challenge, we want to teach, we want to, we see these stories on ESPN about how I'm so happy that, my dad pushed me and went through that. But then you hear, I think, far more where I wish he would have just let me be and let me figure things out, and let the coach be the coach. Let the refs be the refs. I'm guilty many times of seeing a questionable call and hollering out that it's a bad call, and then questioning the coach and their decision. But I don't want somebody watching me do all that all day. Like if somebody's watching me, telling me how to do my job, and they're hollering at me the whole time, how's that productive? So I feel like as parents, we have to learn the role that we play. So back to what you shared, is that it's parent, not coach. Now, if you're the coach, it's different. Then you have that understanding with your child that when we're here, I'm the coach, I'm not the dad. When we go home, I'm the dad. So as the dad, you have to be able to move between those two roles. You can't carry the coach home with you if you are their coach on the diamond. You can encourage, you can say, hey, do you want to go out there and play, whatever. But it's knowing the role that you play in that moment. And the only way you do that is by listening to your kids. And not just hearing the words they're saying, but listen to them. And you did a good job of that. It sounds like that you picked up on, all right, she needs the understanding dad that's going to encourage and then comfort and console.
Man, it isn't easy, Jeff. I have to rely on God daily to give me discernment, because I make a lot of mistakes, brother. The lineman in me wants to come out and be like, well, you need to handle it like this, and this is what you need to do, and listen up. And I've made a lot of mistakes that way. And, I've severed our relationship pretty bad doing that. And, I've had to make throughout these years all the adjustments I needed through the help of the Holy Spirit to be able to get where we're at today because of mistakes like that. But discernment, man, I pray for it every day. I ask God to give me the wisdom and understanding to be able to understand and meet the needs of my children and also my spouse, because a lot of times their spouse, they don't even know what's bothering them. And sometimes they don't want us as a problem solver. They just want us to be there and encourage and listen. And that's hard for somebody like me, because I didn't grow up with encouragement. I grew up with, you better do it or else. So when you grow up like that, you bring that into your marriage, like we were talking about earlier, you bring all this baggage into your marriage, then you fall back to that pattern, right, that you've learned. And next thing you know, you're falling into that same deal, and you're causing all these traumas and severing relationships and everything else because of it.
Yeah, and I think you're in like you said, it's not even I think is you're creating a challenging situation where your children are going to repeat that because they're not going to know how to do anything other than that. I was working with a young man who tends to have outbursts. Well, come to find out, dad has a lot of outbursts. That's what he learned. He grew up as soon as you're angry or disappointed, you blow up. And so many times we have to understand, we talked about earlier, of being authentic and saying, you know what, that's not how I'm supposed to show up. And I'm teaching you a bad lesson. And as they get older, sometimes we all know habits are hard to break. In response to negative things is a habit. It's like this happens, this goes. A good example is when several years back when we were all about to get locked up for several years or 2 weeks, right? With Flatten the Curve. And we were supposed to go somewhere. I was supposed to go see some friends. We were supposed to really have a good time, do some hiking in North Georgia and just do a lot of fun things. Well, as the country was shutting down, we were understanding, well, this is shut down, that shut down. So we can still go up there, but then the national parks were shutting down. You couldn't go anywhere. You were going to stay. And then my wife was like, we're going to drive all the way for 8+ hours and we're just going to sit in a Hampton Inn for 3 days. I really don't think we should go up there. And then, I was so excited. I'm like, no, I think we can. I'm pretty sure we can. Well, then over time, I realized it would be stupid to drive up there and just be stuck, 4 people stuck in a small hotel room for 4 days and we can't go anywhere. So we decided not to go. And I was just acting like a big baby. And I realized, and I do a lot of thinking when I walk the dog, and I realized because I was trying to figure, I was like, why am I acting like this? Why am I short with everybody? Why am I just not being who I want to show up as? And I realized, I'm like, oh, I'm really disappointed right now. And I'm acting like a kid that just didn't get his way. And I went back inside and I got everybody together and I was like, hey, I figured it out. I'm acting like a big baby because I'm disappointed and I wanted to go on this trip. I understand that we shouldn't, but I'll get over it. I just wanted everybody to know that I'm sorry for acting the way that I did. And it was disappointment. And it became a teaching lesson to show my kids is when you're disappointed, and you will be disappointed, there's ways to respond and there's not ways to respond. I was like, Dad did not respond in a productive manner. Just say, I'm really disappointed. And then let's talk about it and then move on. There's times that just needs to happen. And so many times we just don't have the proper response to the outcome. The other part that we talked about earlier is showing our kids and having conversations is when they cry. You don't tell them, you know what, boys don't cry. Don't cry. Don't cry. Well, you're programming them that it's not healthy to cry when it is, but it's okay. You're crying. Why are you crying? Well, this, and this. Okay. Now your tears are not a response in congruence to the situation. If you're disappointed, that's fine. It's age dependent, this conversation, but it's teaching them is that you can't use tears as manipulation. And you have to say, look, if you're sad because something happened, I get it. That's appropriate. But right now you're crying as a form of trying to get what you want from me because you're trying to make me feel bad by you crying. That's not okay. Or if you're frustrated, tears out of frustration isn't appropriate. Let's talk about how you can manifest and work through some of those emotions. And I like to use, you'll like this analogy, traffic lights. I mean, I know you may or may, I don't think you've hung traffic lights, but you may have.
Yeah.
But it's understanding when you're in the green, the yellow, and the red. And if you just look at those and that the picture of a traffic light, a green is when just everything's going great. A yellow is just what you would think. It's when you start to get in that gray area. And then
Mhm.
red is when you're just solid red. And think about your body language, what you say to yourself, your focus, the situations of how you're in the green, and try to always get back to the green as quick as you can. And that's self-awareness. We do
Mm.
that with athletes in the game, but for me, this works great as a dad. Is think about when everything is going great, how do you feel? How are you carrying your shoulders? What does your face look like? And just burn that image into your brain, and then start to be aware of what do you look like when you're in the yellow? What are your shoulders doing? What is your face doing? What are your hands doing? What do you say to yourself? What do you say to others? And then think through that. So if you say a word, then you go, oh, wait, maybe I'm in the yellow and I didn't realize it. How do I get back to the green? So you got to figure out how to recognize, refocus, and then repeat. Like create a cycle that allows you to move back into those areas, so that way you show up as the best dad that you can.
I like that. I've never heard of it like that way. Huh. Um, I know there's a guy out there now um, on social media, and he's always talking about being a professional. No matter what you do, be a pro is his motto, right? And he preaches just acting like it, looking like it until it becomes second nature.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of like what you're trying to say about when you're in the green, act like it, know it, do all this stuff, right? Realize how you're responding, how you're acting when you're in that green, and try to get back to it as quickly as
Yeah.
possible, right?
Well, it comes back
Hmm.
to self-awareness. It's,
Mm-hmm.
if you're an athlete and something goes wrong, you see a lot of football players, they'll slap their helmet, their heads down, and they're just like shaking it. And they're just like, my son just would go overboard when he made a
Mm-hmm.
mistake. Well, that being a perfectionist is impossible. It's also really dangerous. And it's using that technique of the traffic light helps athletes understand where are they. So the hope is if they slap their helmet because they just did something they're really frustrated, that will remind them, wait a minute, that's the indicator that Coach Jeff and I talked about of me moving out of the green and into the yellow. Or that could be your yellow to green, because it could be that the play before you didn't do great, you're still thinking of that one, but then all of a sudden you hit your helmet, or you kick, your shoulders go down, you say something. It's understanding, okay, how do I get back? What's my reset? So you'll see baseball players, before they go to the batter's box, they're adjusting, they're doing all these things. They're getting their focus back into where they need to be. And some will even put like a red dot on their hand, and that's their reset button. And so if they realize that they're in the red, they'll slap their hand because they've created this idea of that's my reset button that gets me back into the green. So
Mm.
just think of fun things that you can do. I have bands on my wrist that I'm a
Mm-hmm.
ruminator. And when I get into that negative cycle and the flywheel starts to go, now I just have to look at them because I know why they're on my wrist. But before, I would actually have to snap them to have that physical response to get me back. You can snap your fingers. There's a lot of things that you can do, but it's how to move yourself out of the one zone and get into the green zone again.
Wow, man. Well, Jeff, thank you so much for just sharing all this information to us. It's amazing to see all the different little tricks that you've come up with to help individuals. I know it's going to have a tremendous response to our the people that are listening, right? And I just want to give you the opportunity to share how people can get a hold of you or get your book or anything like that, if you don't
Yeah,
mind.
David, thank you. So I'm very active on Instagram. So really all the platforms, it's at Jeff and then the number 4 Esther. So Jeff Forrester. on Instagram. So follow me there. Just see a lot of these tips and strategies that I share. And then you can also go to Highlight Coaching. That's HILITE coaching.com. There's a lot of information there. And then for your listeners, if I have, the first 3 people that respond on Instagram with the Show Up Dad podcast in my messages, I'll send them a signed book for free.
All right, on. You guys heard it right there from the man himself, man. Get that free book. It's going to help you out tremendously. Well, once again, thank you, Jeff, and we'll be talking to you soon, brother.
Thanks, David.